The boss of a housing association says he will not resign after the death of a 2-year-old little boy, Awab Ishaq. He died. You might have seen these pictures, by the way, of his flat. It was awful. It was covered in mould. And the little boy, suffered a respiratory illness due to the conditions of this. This was a flat in Rochdale, and the flat was rented from Rochdale Borough-wide Housing Association. His parents, by the way, complained multiple times about the mould in the flat, but the boss there reckons that he's still got the backing of his board. He's going nowhere and he's staying put. But should he be, Jo?
No, of course he shouldn't. And I think, this whole question that you asked at the beginning, Michelle, about accountability, particularly accountability in public life, I was just, before we came on air, just looking back over some of the things, and these will be familiar with all the viewers, and we've talked about it before. Hillsborough, Grenfell, the post office scandal that saw postmasters having to go to High Court. Paula Venables.
That's Awab on the screen, by the way. Sorry, just in case you're watching and wondering what that is. Sorry, continue, Jo.
So Paula Venables, she was the CEO of the post office at the time. Those people, as you know, had to go to court. Very expensive. They lost their livelihoods and their reputations. Sharon Shoesmith, head of children's services at Haringey. She sued for wrongful dismissal and was awarded a 6-figure sum for wrongful dismissal after the Baby P scandal. What is so striking about this, and this Mr Swarbrick, is that he has the backing of his board. Well, they should all resign, frankly. Not just him. They should all resign because they've come out with these weasel words of, it's a tragedy, we're really sorry. Lessons will be learnt. How many times have we heard that? And these people go on to get another job, quite often in the public sector. You could replicate this across the country at health trusts, hospitals, local government and others. But you have to look also at the example, if indeed we look to politicians, for example, look at the accountability in Westminster, which is non-existent. Suella Braverman, Home Secretary, resigned over a ministerial breach, reappointed by Rishi Sunak 6 days later. Boris Johnson, himself, no stranger, or a complete stranger, rather, to complete accountability, trying to protect the back of his cronies.
So you're saying it's rotten right from the very top, this lack of accountability.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that, Toby?
Yes. It's not as if we're not holding people accountable, but we're holding people accountable for the wrong things. So the Free Speech Union, earlier this year, had to come to the defence of a woman who was forced to leave her job working for a housing association because she'd stood as a candidate for a Christian party, and that party said in its manifesto that it believed marriage could only be between a man and a woman. And because she'd stood on a manifesto which included this orthodox Christian belief, she was forced out of this housing association.
What do you mean? How was she forced out?
She was fired.
Oh, so she was sacked?
She was sacked for tweeting, for when they discovered that she'd stood as a candidate. And when she put her manifesto on her Twitter feed, they sacked her, yeah. So if your housing association is indirectly responsible for the death of a child, you don't have to resign. But if you say you don't believe in gay marriage, that's it, you're out on your own.
But why? What is driving that?
I think, these days, people regard giving offence as a greater sin than being a deadbeat landlord.
And you mentioned, by the way, Sharon Shoesmith. This is, of course, you mentioned as well, Baby P. And what you might recall, I think that was in about 2008, she got fired. I think she got fired live on television by Ed Balls during some kind of press conference. And if you think back to what happened with her, that Baby P case, it was something which shocked the nation and still does, I would argue. And to your point, it was supposed to be this turning, turning circle, whatever, this point in society where all things are going to change, and it didn't at all. It continued. But then what happened with her is she was hounded, really hounded. She was front page news. It was stuff like, have you got no shame, and all the rest of it. And she did, I think she got about 600 grand at the end as a variety of different payments. And one of the things that tribunal ruled was actually this kind of whole court of public opinion.
That's right. Yeah.
That's not really what you should base your employment policy on.
No, and she won the compensation for being basically used as a scapegoat. But nevertheless, she was the boss of children's services, just as this Swarbrick man is the boss of the Rochdale Housing Association. And you do sort of think, can you think of anybody apart from Allegra Stratton, who was briefly, communications secretary at Downing Street.
Oh, yeah,
can you think?
that.
But can you think
she
of
was
anybody?
crying, wasn't she, on that?
And she was genuinely sorry, embarrassed, and upset. But can you think of anybody who's resigned?